When someone says they don't use social media, something in you reacts. Curiosity, doubt, maybe even discomfort. Because in a world where visibility equals existence, choosing to disappear feels almost rebellious. And the unsettling part isn't that they left, it's that they seem perfectly fine without it. That quiet choice forces you to look at your own habits more closely than you expected. So when someone chooses silence instead of visibility, it quietly challenges the norm. But what if the decision to avoid social media isn't random or antisocial, but deeply psychological? What if it's not about disconnection from others, but about connection with something else? There's a concept in behavioral psychology called variable reward reinforcement, the same mechanism used in slot machines. Every notification, every like, every comment triggers small bursts of dopamine that keep you coming back. It's not dramatic, it's subtle. And that subtlety is exactly what makes it powerful. Some people, however, are more sensitive to this loop. They notice how their mood shifts depending on engagement. They notice how they check their phone without thinking. They notice how comparison creeps in quietly at night. This awareness can create cognitive dissonance. Cognitive dissonance happens when your behavior doesn't match your values. You say you value presence, but you're mentally elsewhere. You say you don't care about validation, but you refresh to see who viewed your story. For some, that tension becomes uncomfortable enough that the easiest solution is elimination. No app, no trigger, no internal conflict. But that's just one layer. There's also the question of identity. Social media encourages what sociologists call impression management, the careful crafting of how others perceive you. Photos are filtered, captions are polished, moments are curated. Not everyone enjoys performing themselves. Some people experience something close to identity fatigue, the exhaustion that comes from constantly presenting a version of you instead of simply being you. And then there's the comparison effect. Social comparison theory suggests we evaluate ourselves based on others. Online, you are exposed to hundreds of highlight reels every day. Careers advancing, bodies sculpted, relationships glowing. Even if you logically know it's curated, your nervous system reacts as if it's real. For certain personalities, especially those already prone to anxiety or perfectionism, this constant exposure amplifies self-criticism. Avoidance, in this case, isn't weakness, it's regulation. It's someone recognizing their psychological limits and adjusting accordingly. And maybe that's the uncomfortable part. Because when someone chooses not to participate, they quietly expose how automatic our own participation has become. They remind us that logging in is not inevitable, it's a choice. And choices say something about priorities. We often assume that people who don't use social media are missing out. But what if they are protecting something instead? Time, attention, inner stability, or maybe even their sense of self before it gets fragmented into pixels. And that possibility feels unsettling, because it forces you to ask a dangerous question. If they can live without it, why can't you? There's also a quieter reason, one people rarely admit out loud. Some individuals don't avoid social media because they hate it. They avoid it because they know themselves. They know how easily they fall into rabbit holes at midnight. They know how one video becomes 20. They know how a simple scroll can blur an entire evening. And instead of negotiating with temptation every day, they remove the battlefield altogether. That's not avoidance in the pathological sense. That's strategic self-awareness. In psychology, we talk about stimulus control, changing your environment to change your behavior. If the cookies aren't in the house, you don't need willpower. If the app isn't on your phone, you don't need constant discipline. Some people simply redesign their environment to protect their focus. There's also attachment style to consider. For individuals with anxious attachment, social media can intensify hypervigilance. Why haven't they replied? Why did they like someone else's post but not mine? Why are they online but silent? The platform becomes a magnifier for insecurities that already existed. Removing it reduces the noise. For avoidant personalities, on the other hand, social media can feel invasive, an endless expectation to share, to respond, to react, to be reachable. Choosing not to participate can feel like reclaiming emotional boundaries. And then there's a deeper layer that's almost philosophical. Silence. When you don't broadcast your life, your experiences remain intact, unquantified. A dinner isn't content, a trip isn't proof, a thought isn't a tweet. It just is. There's a kind of intimacy in that. Moments that aren't filtered through the invisible audience in your head. And here's the twist. We often label people who don't use social media as disconnected, outdated, even socially awkward. But many of them are deeply connected, just differently. Their conversations are longer, their boredom is real, which means their creativity has space to breathe. They experience fewer micro-comparisons per day. Their nervous system fluctuates less between validation and invisibility. Of course, there are trade-offs. Opportunities can be missed. Communities can be harder to access. Modern life does happen online. Opting out isn't morally superior. It's simply aligned with a different threshold for stimulation. And maybe that's the real point. The existence of people who don't use social media proves that participation isn't mandatory. It's cultural momentum, not biological necessity. When someone steps outside that momentum, they become a mirror. They reflect your habits back to you. They force you to confront whether your scrolling is intentional or automatic, whether your posting is expressive or compensatory, whether your presence online enhances your life or quietly fragments it. And that reflection can be uncomfortable. But discomfort is often the beginning of awareness. You don't need to delete every app tomorrow. This isn't a call for digital extremism. It's an invitation to notice. Notice why you log in. Notice how you feel when you log out. Notice whether you are choosing the platform or whether the platform is choosing you. Because in the end, the real question isn't who uses social media and who doesn't. The real question is this: are you living deliberately? Or are you just reacting to the next notification? If this made you pause, even for a second, that pause is powerful. And if you want to understand more about the hidden psychology behind everyday behaviors, stay curious and stay here.